Ever hear a story so powerful it completely takes over someone's life? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. It's a story about a modern day obsession with a legend that's centuries old, and it's about a man who got so consumed by the past that he risked absolutely everything, all to chase a ghost.
So let's just ask it outright. Can a ghost that's been dead for 300 years actually reach across time and ruin a man's life today? I mean, really? Well, for one particular treasure hunter, the answer seems to be a resounding yes. It's a wild story, so let's get into it.
Okay, so our story doesn't start way back in the 17th century with pirates and galleons. Nope, it begins much, much more recently. It starts with a man who was about to become completely, utterly possessed by a legend. So meet Richard Knight. And let me tell you, he is not your typical treasure hunter. Get this, back in the 1960s, he was in Paris studying to be a mime with the one and only Marcel Marceau. Yeah, a mime. He was a true adventurer, a bit of a risk-taker, the type to just live out of a rucksack with no plans. But then, his entire life took this massive, unexpected turn. He's trying to make it as an actor out in Hollywood, and one day he just wanders into the UCLA library. And that's where he stumbles on the story of Captain William Kidd. And just like that, everything changed. It was as if he was suddenly inhabited by Kidd's ghost. The obsession took hold, and it was total. Now, to really get why Knight became so obsessed, we got to understand the guy who started it all. So let's jump in our time machine and go way back to meet the man, the myth, the legend himself, Captain Kidd. And here's the first major twist in this story. Captain Kidd? He wasn't originally a pirate. He was the exact opposite. He was a pirate hunter. Basically, he was a privateer, which is kind of like a government-sanctioned pirate. The British government hired him to go after the bad guys. He was a respected sea captain with a license from the king himself to protect British trade. But this is where it all starts to go horribly, horribly wrong. Kidd's out at sea for months with zero luck, and his crew, they're getting restless. They haven't been paid, and they're starting to think, hey, maybe piracy isn't so bad after all. So in a moment of desperation, Kidd captures this huge treasure ship, the Quedagh Merchant. You'd think that'd be the big win, right? Wrong. This one act leads directly to his arrest, what was basically a sham trial and a death sentence. And here's the heart of the matter, the real kicker. The Quedagh Merchant wasn't an enemy ship. Kidd swore up and down that it was carrying French papers, which would have made it a totally legal catch. But when it came time for his trial, that one piece of paper, the document that could have saved his neck, had just vanished. Poof, gone. He was left high and dry with no way to defend himself. So that political betrayal is what lit the fuse for this whole legend. And if you fast forward 300 years, that same legend completely grabs hold of Richard Knight. Knight became convinced that Kidd didn't just die. He left behind a secret trail, and he was going to be the one to find it. Okay, so check this out. Back in the 1930s, this collector, a guy named Hubert Palmer, gets his hands on some furniture that supposedly belonged to Captain Kidd. And you won't believe what he finds. He discovers secret compartments hidden in each one. An old oak desk, a captain's sea chest, and even his wife's little workbox, each one had a hidden map inside. It was like a real-life treasure hunt, with each map leading to the next clue. And that final map, that was the big one. It had actual coordinates, latitude and longitude. But of course, there was a catch, a really big one. See, back in Kidd's day, they hadn't agreed on where zero was for longitude. The zero meridian could have been based in Paris or Cadiz or who knows where. So before he could find the treasure, Knight had to solve this 300-year-old navigation puzzle. So Knight just buries himself in old charts, cross-referencing everything. And then he finds it. A match. An island with the right shape and a very telling name, Hontre Lan, which, get this, translates to Grand Pirate Island. But the location, oh man, the location was the worst-case scenario. It was deep inside the territorial waters of communist Vietnam, a place that was, to put it mildly, not friendly to Westerners. But for a guy like Richard Knight, a guy who's completely obsessed, the word impossible doesn't really mean much. It's just another hurdle to jump. He was dead set on getting to that island, and he didn't care what it would cost him. And this is where the story gets really weird, almost spooky. Knight's life starts to look exactly like Captain Kidd's, just centuries apart. Kidd was accused of being a pirate, Knight gets accused of being a spy. Kidd was sentenced to hang, Knight was staring down the barrel of a firing squad. I mean, both men ended up in a foreign prison, desperately trying to bargain for their lives. So his grand expedition starts to fall apart, fast. All his investors get nervous and pull their money. But is Knight deterred? Not a chance. He finds an 18-year-old American photojournalist, Fred Graham, who's just looking for a big adventure. So in May of '83, the two of them launch this totally illegal trip, sneak into Vietnamese waters, make it to the island, and yep, they're arrested pretty much the second their feet hit the sand. They get thrown into these disgusting, rat-filled cells and are interrogated over and over again. The Vietnamese authorities just aren't buying his whole treasure hunting story. I mean, come on. To them, it's obvious. He's a CIA spy. And the penalty for spying? Execution. Then, in a crazy twist, the Vietnamese government decides to play pirate. They demand a ransom, $10,000 per man. Simple enough, right? Except for one huge problem. The British and US governments have a strict policy. We do not pay ransoms. So Knight and Graham, they were completely on their own. So this whole mess begs the question, how did this legend even start? Why did it have such an unbreakable grip on Richard Knight and so many other people over the years? Well, let's pinpoint the exact moment this whole myth of Captain Kidd's lost treasure came into being. This is the moment, right here. Kidd is condemned to die. He's got nothing left to lose, so he writes one last desperate letter to the government. In it, he makes a spectacular claim. He's hidden another, even bigger treasure. And he says, "Spare my life and I'll show you where it is." It was his final Hail Mary. And the value of this supposed treasure? We're talking about something worth around £15 million in today's money. 15 million. That's the prize that has been driving treasure hunters crazy for centuries. That's the kind of money that makes people do, well, really foolish things. But the government, they didn't bite. For them, keeping their trading partners in India happy was worth more than any pirate's gold. So they took Kidd to the gallows. And in a final grim twist, the rope actually snapped the first time they tried to hang him. But the second, it held. They then tarred his body and hung it in a cage by the River Thames as a warning to everyone else. Captain Kidd was dead, but his legend, it was just getting started. So what happened to Richard Knight? Well, after over a year stuck in that Vietnamese prison, his ransom was paid, cobbled together by friends, family, even a complete stranger. But getting out didn't cure him, not at all. The obsession was still there. He never, ever stopped believing that treasure was real. He passed away in 2002, and right up to the end, he was still chasing the ghost of Captain Kidd, still planning his next expedition. And that really brings us to the big question at the end of all this. You've got Captain Kidd, who maybe invented the whole legend just to save his own skin. And then you have Richard Knight, who basically sacrificed his life to chase it. So you have to wonder, what's more powerful, the actual treasure or just the dream of it?